Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an instructive game to share with you from the 2024 FIDE World Blitz Chess Championship. This was a quarterfinal game, game number 2. Game 1 was a draw. On the white end, Hans Niemann playing against Magnus Carlsen. So the opening, we have a Sicilian defense, Rossolimo Attack. A rare ending to this game, a rare ending, I should say, for Carlsen. What goes on in this early phase? Well, after e5, there's now going to be a big fight over d5. This is now a hole, so white will direct pieces on that square. No thought given to bishop captures knight here, exchanging bad bishop for the knight. This would repair the d5 square. Focus is to one day pivot on this weak point. So bishop c4, d3, h3. What's h3 about? Producing that flight square for the king? Well, more long-term, yes. White's idea here, after castles, well, a quick pivot on h2. So what's going on with this maneuver? Well, it's fighting for the d5 square. Oddly enough, the knight is looking next to go to g4, exchange itself for the knight, which is a defender of that point. Bishop e6 follows, knight g4 sure enough. Little to no thought given really to knight captures knight, gifting white a file. No thanks. In this game, knight d4 is played. Considered top is the following. Knight takes e4. Now, how would this play out? Well, if you take with the pawn, that hangs the bishop. If you take with the knight, that runs into a fork. And if you first remove this liability, the light square bishop exchanging on e6, this is how it would end up playing out. Balanced material in the end. It calls this one around minus 0.5. Interesting position. This hole is still present on d5. Top moves from here, queen d7 and d5. If you play queen d7, white could consider expanding with this doubled pawn, king in on the d5 square, maybe transfer the knight to that square. And if d5 is played, this point becomes a target. So just mapping it out, this knight, even though it is not central, is a pretty interesting piece. It's a stable knight, and there's a competition now over the e5 square. All right, this top line was not played. After knight g4, it is knight d4, a4, a6, knight takes, bishop takes, hop into that weak square. Also, nearby there is c3. Follow-up, b5. Pop quiz. How would you respond to this move? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, this was an error by Carlsen. He was too quick to play b5 here. This set him into his second think. His first think was actually after knight h2 was played. Spent about 30 seconds after knight h2. This was a poor decision here. There's something he overlooked. Rather than b5, bishop g5, welcoming bad for good bishop exchange, or even rook b8, preparing b5 was better. What did Carlsen overlook? Well, it's that white could take on b5, the move played in the game, and black is now not in position to recapture with the pawn and keep a healthy pawn island of 7. If you take in this position with the pawn in the game, it's knight takes pawn. If you take with the pawn, this queen is now overloaded. 2 jobs, and white would be able to respond with rook takes rook, and then knight takes bishop, and the king side is fractured. We could take this out a little bit more. You take with the pawn or the knight, and you take with the pawn, you're looking at bishop h6, and rook f7, followed by kicking the knight, and then queen g4 check, winning the e6 pawn. That's just one way. White could realize the advantage right away on the king's side. Another approach, after knight takes bishop, well, we don't need to see anything direct. We don't need to see the win of material. Just know that this guy here is a giant pest, taking away that flight square. Back rank issues will, it seems like, continually be a problem here for Team Black. This pawn can easily drop, so you cannot afford, as Black, to have your kingside fractured like this. So you had to take a U-turn here and recapture with the knight. Not ideal. Now we have this isolated a6 pawn. Not the end of the world. Let's see how this one continues. White, however, still, well, for choice here, about close to +1. Bishop g5, not so quick to exchange bishops. Black has to work a little bit harder before that exchange is in there. King h8, development with tempo, bishop d8. We get bishop takes bishop here. Yeah, White's idea, expand with f4. And don't even spend time ducking the dark square bishop exchange. He's looking forward to this break. We get that exchange in there, and f4 played right away. Notice, if c3 is played here, cutting out knight d4, this knight will pivot to c7, and the fight will continue over d5. All right, in this game, we carry on with the break, f4, two attackers now on e5, f6, best move in this case. We get the capture, small improving moves, no checks on the back rank for White. Pressure on the bishop, it's secured with b3. Pressing now with a5, looking to exchange, maybe one day get rid of this liability, this isolated pawn. Knight c3, we get an exchange now on c4. Big decision here. How to recapture exactly. In the game, White takes away from the center. If you take towards the center and keep this group of 4 together, you are giving Black a passed pawn. It's probably a pawn you could keep under control. Rook a3, for instance, if this queen tries to get active, rook a3. White plays it, doesn't even want to allow this pawn to be passed. So he takes away from the center. Now a downside with this capture, we see this downside right away. The queen can now enter on d2 and pinpoint 2 weak points. Some material will be lost now. Both sides will be trading blows. White goes after c5, Black goes after c2. Notice that this would not be a moment for White to say, I need a flight square. Let me flick in the flight square right now, because this knight would then drop into d5 and White would without question be better. This knight, constant forks, Black would now have to be on the lookout for. And if the knight is a pest, you get rid of it, you would have to deal then with a connected passed pawn. Very valuable for White. In this game, not the time here to flick in the flight square. Queen activity. Knight a4, queen takes c, knight takes c, the bishop is hit, punches back at the queen. We get a queen exchange. Position, round even. However, if there is a better side, it would be White. Easier to play, has a passed pawn, has a dangerous knight, and Black still has a back rank issue, still has to devote a tempo to securing the back rank. White can use this to his advantage for as long as there is not a flight square for the Black king. We continue with rook f to b8, rook a3, rook c8, knight b7. Really irritating piece to tame. Problem on a5. There's a fork nearby on d6. This is not a window for Black to play a4 and try and break up this pawn structure with there being pressure here on c4. In the game, rook a to b8 is played. If a4, this is how it would play out, something like this. knight for bishop exchange, and now once there isn't this pressure on c4, you could just win the pawn. So in this game, what do we have? After knight b7, rook a b8, knight d6, rook c7, white wins the pawn. This guy here, poison. In the game, king g8 is played. If you take the pawn, there would follow knight takes bishop, and white wins the piece. You can't recapture because of the back rank mates, either rook moving in. So, after rook takes a, king g8 it is. Follow up, rook b5, makes sense. Active defense of the b pawn. Why not trade when you're up the pawn? Two connected passers now for Team White. Rook a8 is the follow-up. And from here we have knight takes bishop. So both players pretty much in hyperbullet mode here. 14 seconds for Niemann, 12 seconds for Carlsen. You still have that 2-second increment. Top here, a really clean approach for white. Rather than knight for bishop exchange, would be rook a1, yet again taking advantage of the back rank issue. There is still no flight square with this knight covering f7. This rook is poison. Rook b8 will lead to checkmate. And if black ducks the rook exchange, this is pretty much as far as you need to go to realize white is definitely going to win this one. This construction kills pretty much every black piece, secures a pawn, prevents a pawn break. What is the knight not doing? Black in this position would be playing on 2 ranks. White is playing on 6. All right, from here, we end up seeing the minor piece exchange. Advance the passed pawns from here. Rook b2, b4. Follow up rook b2 here. You're just playing at this stage intuitively, very little calculation. The best move here for black is to put the rook on c2. There is a dream square for black, a dream square for this rook, and it is the c4 square. You put pressure on 3 white pawns. I guess the intuitive feel here was, let me put pressure on both of white's pawns. Rook c2 to c4 was the better try here for black. Still considered holdable, even though there are these 2 connected passed pawns. Follow up, rook b2 it is. Rook b8, probably a blunder in this time pressure, which still ends up turning out okay for white. Rook c2 is top in this position. Black ends up taking on c5. If you take back, the rook is going to fall. All right, that was probably blundered, but it works out for white because now there is a 7th rank issue. Rook d7 check. If king g7, we're going to double up. G pawn will fall, the H pawn will fall. There's no fear of black doubling in a line like that on g2 because a rook will be on g7, securing that weak point. So the king in this position goes to e6. Rook takes g, completely winning at this stage for Team White. Rook c6, b5. Now, where do you go with the rook? If you leave the 6th rank, rook c2, there's rook b6, and checkmate next. And you do have to respect that this is a threat. You cannot rely on this pin here. So for instance, if black making a passing move here, black goes with h6. Yes, you still could take on c6 and allow this and still be winning, but simplest would be to land this check, unpin yourself, and only then scoop up the rook. All right, there is a detail that Carlsen overlooked in this position. He plays on one more move, rook d6, and this game ends in a rare way for Carlsen, and that is with checkmate. Had he seen that rook d6 would run into this mate e1, he probably would have resigned at this moment here, but this one ends on the spot with rook e8. So, what did you think of this one? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.